Good afternoon and welcome to Texworld New York City's educational series panel discussion, Made in the USA, Sourcing Where You Sell Makes Good Business Sense. Please welcome moderator Alex Whitley, Vice President of Sales at Contempora Fabrics, and panelists Laura Thornquist, President, Fiber 52, Mitch Kahn, Founder and President, Unionware, Ron Roach, President, Contempora Fabrics, and Stephen Hawkins, President, America Knits.
Good afternoon. As the announcer just said, my name is Alex Whitley, Vice President of Sales at Contempora Fabrics. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel this afternoon. I will tell you up front that I've never moderated a panel before, so please forgive me as I stumble through this. Will Duncan, who is the Executive Director of Seams, was supposed to be your moderator, but unfortunately he's had some health concerns and he couldn't be here, so I'm a last-minute fill-in for him. I want to start by telling you what all these companies have in common. Aside from being U.S. companies here in America, they're also members of the Seams organization. And Seams is an association of U.S. supply chain for the cut and sew industry that covers all facets. It's from yarn suppliers, fiber technology suppliers, cut and sew garment manufacturers, on up to brands, sewing threads, anything you can think of that's necessary to produce a sewn product here in the U.S. You can see here on this slide that we have over 220 members located from all across the U.S. A heavy concentration here on the East Coast, but we do have a number of members out on LA in particular. And we're servicing brands and retailers and technology, but basically anything you can think of that goes into the cut and sew industry. Member support for Seams. Seams is a networking organization. There are e-blasts, there are weekly news briefs that come out, there's a bi-monthly newsletter, but for those of you in the audience, the one thing I do want to point out in particular is the power search. If you go to the Seams website, there is a tab at the top for a power search, and if you're looking for a product domestically, you can type in what you're looking for and it's going to come back with the selections of answers for you. If you don't find particularly what you're looking for, you can also contact the Seams office direct and they will put you in touch with a member that might be able to support you. I know from my perspective, when all of us represented here today have booths in the Seams Pavilion up near the entrance of the show, so I encourage you to stop by later. But when somebody comes by my booth and says, I'm looking for this and it's not a product we produce, I'm always trying to point them in a direction and help them find that source. Now I'm going to turn it over to this panel. We had a group discussion last week in preparation for this, and I was amazed by the insight and comments that were generated through that discussion. I'm looking forward to what they have to say to you, because I think I will glean some information as well. But to start, I'm going to have each of them give a brief description, introduction of themselves and their companies.
Hi, my name is Mitch Kahn. I'm the president of Unionware. I'm going to tell you a couple things that might surprise you. One is that we have about 160 sewing machine operators about 11 miles from here in Newark, New Jersey. Second thing is that we started the business in 1992. It's not some old family business. And we started it because in 1991, baseball hats were not a fashion item. It was a sporting good. And I thought introducing baseball hats to fashion brands was a great idea. We actually hit the ground running, got a lot of streetwear business back in 1992, got a big contract from Ralph Lauren. And then by 1994, every single one of our clients moved their manufacturing to Asia. And we had to reinvent ourselves. So for the last 25 years or so, we've moved out of fashion and into the military business. We moved into promotional products. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, we started seeing a lot of fashion brands come back. We manufacture baseball hats, we do embroidery, we manufacture all sorts of sewn bags. We're very happy to be here, and we're really excited about the amount of interest in domestically made goods here.
My name is Steve Hawkins. I'm president of America Knits. America Knits is a premium manufacturer of finished goods, t-shirts, sweatshirts, anything made out of knit. We handle it from product development all the way through packaging, screen printing, embroidery, and from concept to finished product. We are the newbies on the panel. We started in 2019. I've been in the business all my life because I'm from North Carolina, which is the mecca of textiles. But anyway, I'm in Georgia and proud to be up here on the panel. America Knits, I think, has proven a concept that actually it can be done here in America. And when garments have less than 5 minutes standard allowed minutes in them, there's really no reason not to. And we'll get more into that as we get into the panel discussion about the sustainability part of it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ron Roach, and I am president of Contemporary Fabrics. We are a circular knit manufacturer out of North Carolina. We have been in business since 1972, so we've been around a while. We're a little unique in our industry. In 1986, we became an ESOP company. I don't know if anybody's aware of what an ESOP company is, but we are a 100% employee-owned company, so everybody there starts to accumulate ownership after a 1-year waiting period. Our business, what Mitch mentioned about, reinventing ourselves. Since 1972, I've been there 39 years, and I can tell you at least 6 times we've had to reinvent who we were. A perfect example is 20 years ago, we were 100% women's wear, 100%, men's wear, children's wear. Today, we do none of that. We are almost 80% team sports, performance, and workwear. And you'll learn more about it as we go.
So I guess you could say I'm the new kid on the block. My name's Laura Thornquist. I'm with Fiber 52. I am the president there, but my job also entails probably a therapist, receptionist, warehouse mover, you name it, because we are a startup company. Wouldn't have it any other way. We've been around since December of 2022. I come from our parent company, which is Energy Ogre, based out of Houston, Texas. Energy, electricity. Now I'm in the textile industry, go figure, right? Anyway, with that being said, I was their chief operating officer and their chief marketing officer. So I am responsible for the implementation of the intellectual property of Fiber 52 as well as the business strategy of Fiber 52. And Fiber 52 is a patent-pending wet processing dyeing technology with massive sustainable impact. Our goal is to be net neutral, because everybody says sustainable costs more. I don't believe that's true. In fact, I know it's not true, because we're going in net neutral, where the brands and the mills will save money. The brands love the sustainable call-outs. The mills love the money savings. And our end fabric, the consumers really love, because it's stronger and it has a better natural feel. So with that being said, we're very excited to be a part of this group. We have 5 brands that we're in various stages of commercialization. We've got 2 certified mills on a global scale and 12 other mills across the globe that are in stages and phases of commercialization. So we're very excited.
Thank you all. Okay, everybody in the audience wants to know the big question: how are you guys successful here in the U.S. competing against low-cost labor throughout the world? Ron, you want to start, tackle that?
Sure. I think I got to start by going back to kind of who we are. By the fact that we are an employee-owned company, it has probably saved us many times over, because everybody there has a vested interest. I mean, think of an employee-owned company as one big retirement account. So everybody's retirement is depending on this company's doing well. So I think I got to start with that as number one. Number two, I think, changing our business model 20 years ago to becoming team sports and performance, where it was very synthetic driven. If you guys know what the duty rates are in synthetics coming to the country, they are still very high. They can run as high as 28 to 30%. And when we're dealing in those kind of categories, what we found is we can compete very, very well on the fabric level, even with Asia. So I think it starts with that, Alex. I think it's our business is very relationship driven. We've been very fortunate to have really good partnerships where there's a lot of trust involved, and we can win on delivery, we can win on service, we can win on quality. But unless there's trust between us and the people we're dealing with, the brands and the retailers, because all of our customers are brands or a retailer, unless there's trust between those two entities, we can't have speed. Because if we're going to have speed, someone has to own inventory at some level down the line. So we work to develop those relationships, so we do have trust. So I think it's employee ownership. I think it's quality, service, and speed. Well, we'll never be the cheapest, clearly.
Okay. Steve, your business is quite a bit different. It is labor driven. It's not like textile operation where there's not that many employees in a fabric mill compared to your sewing operation. Would you like to touch on that?
Absolutely. Mitch and I are both finance majors, I found out yesterday, so we're numbers guys. The thing that people don't always see, and particularly smaller brands, bigger brands, they've got departments of financial analysts. What you project to sell that doesn't sell and ends up getting closed out is a real cost. So when you go out there and you say, I want a trendy graphic and I think it's going to sell, but when it doesn't sell, what happens? There's hidden loss there. When you go to an American-made supply chain, and especially one that makes premium products with water-based inks, 305 screens, and that may not mean anything to anybody, but it's as good as made anywhere. And when you're able to purchase and have manufactured what is selling, even if it costs you $2 or $3 more in labor, the sales that you're not losing because you're making what's selling is a big deal with cost. It's not always about FOB cost.
Mitch, do you have anything you'd like to add?
We definitely train as many people as possible on the concept of total cost of ownership, and that's looking at the entire cost of importing goods and then dividing that by the number of units that you have. Instead of looking at unit cost, we found that the average total cost of ownership is about 2.5 times the unit cost, especially in smaller quantities. And we encourage brands to take a look at that, and they'll find that the break-even quantity that they need to make it worth to import goods is a lot higher than they actually thought. Once we've educated people on it and they realize that the cost isn't that different, we then can lean into a few different things. Number one is that brands they genuinely want to co-brand with the most powerful label in the world, which is Made in USA. They can put their brand inside of a product and they put it right next to Made in USA. That's extremely powerful. That has a lot of value to the product. The second thing is people are willing to pay more for a Made in USA product. And you add those three things together, and there are many, many instances where it is worth it for brands to manufacture domestically. One thing we have going for us this year is that it's an election year. It's also an Olympic year. We've noticed for the last 20 years that every 4 years, searches for Made in USA absolutely spike because everyone's talking about Made in USA, everyone's talking about USA. And we're about to enter a perfect storm of attention paid to Made in USA because in the next 5 years, we have 2 general elections, we have a domestic World Cup, we have a domestic Olympics, and it's the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. For anyone who remembers the bicentennial, all people are going to be talking about for a year or 2 is USA. So we all have that going for us. Final thing I want to add about the cost thing is when we're looking at designs, a lot of designs, particularly from the larger brands, is made to be made overseas in a very low-cost labor environment. We absolutely re-engineer every product that comes to us for a high labor cost environment. We just work with the designers to make sure that the product looks the same and has the same functionality, but there's less labor, and sometimes you have to spend a little more money on materials. We found in China in particular, Chinese factories will throw a lot of labor at products to save money on materials. We see tote bags come to us all the time with a seam across the bottom, which makes absolutely no sense from a construction standpoint or a labor standpoint. So we'll take that and we'll just fold up the bag and do things like that. It's things like that, along with automation and lean manufacturing and other sorts of technologies that have enabled us to grow from 6 people to 160 people in 32 years.
Thank you, Mitch. Well, Steve and Mitch, you both brought up something that I find interesting. You talked about brands being able to buy smaller quantities so they don't close out as much product at the end of season. They're not stuck with dead inventory, which leads me to my next question for the panel about sustainability. If they're not closing out as many products, if they're not having this excess inventory, that's got to be fewer items ending up in our landfills or in some type of composting situation or in some type of recycling situation. Now, Laura, sustainability, that's your company. That's what you're built off of. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there?
Well, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more because we are so new. I guess you could say sustainability is in our middle name. It really wasn't intended to be that way, but our parent company embraces emerging technology. And we came across Graham Stewart, who's back there. He's been in the industry for 50 plus years, and he knew there had to be a gentler, kinder way of treating cotton. We've done conventionally, wet processing conventionally the same way for years, 40 plus years at least, without any changes. So we embrace cotton for what it is. Out in nature, it's a pretty beautiful plant, protects itself. We keep some of those paraffins, those waxes on through the wet process, and we've learned that it reduces time, water, and energy up to 75% in many cases. I can tell you we're having a massive impact over in Asia right now. We're getting a lot of engagement over in Asia. We've run trials all over the world, from Europe to Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, South and Central America, and of course here in the United States. So, we hit the eureka, with sustainability. We didn't, say, hey, we want to build a sustainable product. We just recognized what we had. So we're embracing it, and we're very pleased to say that the world is embracing what we have to offer. At least they're listening to us. They're skeptical. I promise you that. I've run hundreds of trials, but we're getting there.
Great, thanks, Laura. Well, sustainability is important to everybody here, I'm sure. Ron, at Contempra, has sustainability come into play there?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back what it meant, even let's say 15, 20 years ago when it first became like the buzzword, it was more centered around, light savings or, counting how many times you're throwing away, things into the dumpster. Today, it's a complete, all of that is assumed now. Today is a completely different model. I mean, if you heard me talk about most of our business is team sports and performance, so you can guess who our customers are. They are very, very outdoor driven. They are all about sustainability. So pretty much everybody that is buying synthetics from us, I would say 90% of them are now running recycled polyester. The next step is we're doing a lot of development for major athletic brands that are now running another product that is now going to be able to move away in the landfill, because we know polyester can sit in a landfill sometimes for several hundred years. There's another item out there that will allow it to decompose now in a year. So we're heavily moving in that direction very quickly. So for us, it's all about, at least right now, it's fiber, it's traceability. I mean, every major brand we work with, we have to show them the traceability from where the fiber came from, or if it's cotton, we have to show them where the cotton came from. We have to show them where what happened in our plant, where it got dyed, where it got cut and sewn. It's a complete traceability, and that's not going to go away. I mean, I think as the U.S. continues to catch up with what the rest of the world may be requiring, I think it's going to something we're all going to have to face.
Steve, I know in discussions with you before, you've got a fairly unique sustainability story in your product and your brand. You kind of share on that too?
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realize the geographical footprint of your entire supply chain matters. And I believe that wherever shirts are worn, they should be produced entirely as close to that as possible, for all the reasons that sustainability, all the premises behind sustainability. We actually have our supply chain where we've partnered with growers, the growers with best practices in the state of Georgia that are conservative with their land, they take care of their land, they're generational farmers, and our entire supply chain from where the cotton is grown is spun at Parkdale Mills, which is one of the major players in the world, and then the fabric is made by Contempra, my friends on stage here, and we have actually developed a circle that's 238 miles, and that's from the dirt to the finished shirt, and we can scale it. Our plant has 5 kids under the age of 32, which is unheard of in an apparel plant. Everybody knows that everybody's hair is the color of mine in apparel plant. But we have a team of young engineers, young marketing guys, and they are excited about it, and they've learned the business. And why would they do that? The reason is because if we can disrupt the apparel business and we can get brands like you guys to partner up, we're going to set up 5 America knits, and every one of those young guys is going to have their own plant.
I think that's pretty amazing when you start thinking about supply chain today. So much of it is traveling 6,000, 8,000 miles. Steve's supply chain is just over 200 miles. That's a lot to be spoken for.
One other point to make on that.
Sure, Bit.
Recent article said that the average T-shirt an American is wearing has traveled over 17,000 miles from fiber to finished shirt, which means the USA supplies most of the cotton because it's most consistently dyeable. So cotton leaves here, goes to China, it's made in China, it's sewn in Vietnam or Bangladesh, it comes back here and is sold. And that's pretty sad. If you really want to be sustainable, I don't know how you do that and say you're sustainable.
Mitch, I know yours is a little different story on sustainability. You're very concerned about your workforce and workers' rights and the conditions that they work in. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so the other side of sustainability as far as brands and retailers are concerned are the compliance audits that we have to do. And on the cut and sew side, most of the compliance audits is about social compliance or workers' rights. Made in USA will qualify you for living wage. It will qualify you for social compliance, any sort of compliance with workers' rights. We get the benefit of the doubt on that. And we do see a lot of business come our way because people don't want to deal with the audits overseas, which can get incredibly expensive, especially as units dwindle. We found, not just at our own company, but basically every textile business that is left in America is now known to treat their workers extremely well. It's a very heavily monitored business. Something that a lot of people don't know is that most textile businesses in the United States have some business with the federal government. There's a law that requires the military to buy domestic textiles, and that's what's enabled our business and a lot of other businesses in our industry to survive the period from around 1992 to around 2018 when prices were much, much lower overseas. Now that the textile business is coming back, most of the businesses have been very heavily monitored by the brands and by the military monitors as well. And people should not have any concern about the way that the workers are treated in domestic textile factories.
I think that's a very important thing to consider. We see so much negativity on social media associated with some factories and concern about forced labor, and that's one thing that's never concerned with these U.S. companies is the fact that they do have great working conditions. Ron mentioned that Contempor is an ESOP employee-owned, so there's a lot to be said for that. Laura, let's change gears. You just told us that you're a relatively new company, startup. Obstacles. What's been your biggest obstacle in getting the product rolling and getting your technology out there into the industry?
Yeah, I'll speak first on a global level, and then I'll speak directly to the United States. Some of the obstacles because they're different. The first obstacle clearly is overcoming the skeptics. As I'd stated before, when you do something the same way for centuries or a century or 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, it's the right way. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the motto goes. So we are changing people's mindsets on how we bleach and dye cellulose fibers, and people are skeptical, so we got to prove it. And so it takes time to prove it. We do trials after trials after trials. They get costly, but we're finally getting slow adoption. So that's been a big obstacle. I have employees globally. I've got 3 in Italy, 1 in Sweden, 4 in Bangladesh, 2 in Pakistan, and then the rest are in the United States. So you have that time difference. So we have calls all hours of the day, in the middle of the night sometimes with brands or mills. That is a big obstacle. Then, of course, the cultural nuances. Trying to integrate a USA company and their IP on a global scale while protecting IP. That is a big deal as well. Then, of course, we've got to prove what we're saying. We've got to support what we're saying. Then we have to have certifications about our chemistry and LCAs and you name it. So it's a big job trying to get introduced into the textile space. But it's been fun. I will tell you, I love the textile industry. Coming from the electricity space, way different, big time way different, but way better in my mind. Now, when it comes to the United States, arms have been open. They are very welcoming to new technology, but what I can say, it's harder to get adoption because in these mills in the U.S., they need volume. We've tried, we've done our chemistry in a lot of these mills, and they know how it works, but they need brands. They need volume. They're very interested in sustainability, and I think we could get adoption here pretty quickly, but again, it's the chicken or the egg type of situation is what we run into.
They need a partner,
they do
brand
need a partner.
retailer
That's
to step
correct.
up and say, I want to do this with you.
And I mean, we have much success speaking with the brands. They're open to hearing what we want to say. The mills, they're sometimes a little hesitant, as I mentioned. They're skeptical until we prove it. And now, then you have to price it but, trying to bring the brands back home, it's going to be a challenge because they've built these partnerships overseas. And once you had this COVID situation that went on, it's more than just a partnership. It's a trust, that they had to lean on one another through all of that. So yeah, we need some partners to bring business back home.
Thank you, Laura. Ron, along those same lines, but you're not a startup. Contemporary's been in business for 52 years, you mentioned. What's some of the biggest hurdles that you're facing today?
I think it's the same. We've had one that we've always faced, and obviously since COVID or during COVID, it became really our number one obstacle, which was labor shortages. It was a major issue for us coming out of 2020, going into 2021. Our busiest year in business was 2022, believe it or not. It was kind of a time where basically the entire world stopped ordering sports apparel in 21, and then everybody decided they need to overbuy in 21 and 22, which leaves us to where we're at now, where nobody's buying. So, but to answer that, Alex, it's going to continue to be labor shortages and competing for labor. I think rising costs of our entire supply chain over the last 2 years is something we're going to battle. I mean, you heard me say that we're never going to be the cheapest U.S. manufacturer in the world on fabric. But so we're going to have to try to win on all the other levels, whether it's speed, delivery. Steve was talking about stock outs and not having the right product at the right time. When we can win trust with our brand partners, and they're willing to give us gray goods orders, and they color it up, we can have them dyed goods in their specific color in about 10 days. And you're not going to be able to do that out of Asia. So it's going to continue to kind of build partnerships. It's going to continue to try to educate the brands and the retailers, to what Steve said also, is that that lowest price is not necessarily the best cost. And that's something we're going to have to keep in the forefront.
So it sounds like you're saying we need to do a better job of educating our customers as to what the U.S. supply chain can do, aside from looking at this shirt cost me $1 versus this shirt cost me $3.
Yeah, I think, and we actually had a big discussion internally about this. Are we not developing the right products? And what we found is we can develop the most amazing products, but if they don't want it, it doesn't really matter. So where we're finding success is when people are telling us to develop their specific product, so that we're not kind of throwing dart at a dartboard. So yeah, I think it's definitely education. I think it's keeping things in the forefront, and hopefully, we've definitely seen a move back to the United States. And when I say, let me also say the Western Hemisphere, because I think we can't sit up here and just include the U.S. only. We've got to include the Western Hemisphere, because that is a big part of kind of what the business is also becoming. But they go hand in hand. And I think the other thing we're doing, Alex, is we're also combining efforts with some of our competitors. If they have relationships with certain brands that we don't, and we have the same thing, how do we do the business together so that we both have a sustainable business?
Yeah, I think that's unique about the U.S. industry. From my experience, we don't have domestic competition, we have domestic allies. And it's how do we work together to service the brand and retailers with the products they need and the time they need it, and hopefully at a cost that they can work with. So I think that's very unique within our industry. Mitch, Steve, I'll give you guys each a chance to address hurdles that you may be facing today.
I think the biggest hurdle that we have in the textile business is that the infrastructure for the textile business is still really in Asia. A lot of the testing that we have to comply with is based on inks and products and other things that are illegal in the United States that we don't even have access to, but are still legal in certain countries overseas. And there aren't even testing labs in the United States for that, but we still may have to comply with certain products. We've had instances where we've had to ship products to Hong Kong for testing because there was no available testing in the United States. There are also standards that are based on Asia. We recently had an audit where we had to comply, and we obviously didn't. We had to certify that our wages were at least 200% of the prevailing minimum wage. In New Jersey, that would be $30.36, which is very expensive for sewing labor. We had to say no, and then we had to get permission to continue manufacturing for that particular customer. And finally, one of the issues that we have is that because a lot of the sewing still takes place in Asia, there's not a lot of inventory of goods that are made, which makes it difficult for smaller designers to get the fabrics that they need and the quantities they need to do runs of 500 or even 2,000 garments. It's very hard to get a mill's interest to do enough fabric for that, and there's just not places that have inventory here for that. So that's one of the reasons we're a recent addition to Seams. We joined 3 years ago, and we found that the Seams organization has enabled us to network with these guys and hundreds of other suppliers to fill most of the needs that we have for stuff that we weren't able to find domestically.
You're good? Okay. Mitch, you just brought up something about, you touched back on Seams and the network, and that's what we said to begin with. Seams is all about networking. If any of you are interested in more information on Seams, we do have a booth out front with some additional details that you can learn. But let's start with Ron. I mean, you were just president of Seams. Your term ended December 31st. What's your opinion of Seams in terms of the network and the collaboration between the companies that are members of the organization?
Wow. We've been members of Seams for, I'm not even sure how long. I'm just going to throw out a number, maybe 25 years, so a long time. I think it is a very unique organization where you have the entire U.S. supply chain in a room several times a year, which is invaluable to us to share ideas, to share thoughts, to be able to network. But I think just as importantly, and I think if we don't touch base on this, we'd be doing ourselves a disservice, but I think we all just need to remember that during COVID, all these U.S. textile companies, not just me, but probably Mitch, maybe even Steve. I'm not sure Steve was operating fully then, but every U.S. textile company and every garment manufacturer in this country basically flipped their business around to start providing masks and gowns. And without that, this country would have been in really, really deep, deep trouble. I know for us, in March of 20, we laid off the entire plant, 200 people. 3 days later, we opened back up because we were able to secure enough business to start making for masks and for gowns. And we actually started making our own masks, and we don't even own a sewing machine. But that's to me, so I think that's important to note, Alex. And Seams was a big part of that. Seams helped us connect the dots. Seams helped us figure out, okay, we don't buy elastic. Where are we going to get elastic from? We don't buy, non-wovens. We don't even know what a non-woven is, but we're going to start making masks out of it. That kind of stuff. So I think it goes without saying that's the part that it played for us during that time.
Thanks. Steve, you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ron. And the U.S. textile business did come together because of the need, and we all worked together. There was a consortium put together by the administration at that time, and it consisted of 7 different companies headed by Parkdale, and American Knits was one of those 7. And we actually were invited and featured in the State of the State speech in the state of Georgia. And I found myself on the front row, and what it was about was the resiliency of Georgians and the fact that those 72 employees at American Knits, when the COVID was killing people, were showing up for work and making masks for FEMA and everybody else. And funny story, I got home and my boys said, "Daddy, there was a war hero on one side of you and there was a scientist on the other. Did you feel out of place?" I said, 100% Forrest Gump moment for sure.
Steve, I'm going to throw you a question that we haven't talked about, but I'm curious and I think it'd be important for the audience to hear. You ran Cut and Sew in Central America and in Honduras for many, many years. Why'd you come back to the U.S.?
You want the truth or you want a business answer? The truth. All right. All right. I had two young boys. One was 4 and one was 1, and I felt like I wanted to raise them same place I was raised. And at that time, there was a demand, but my motivation was more lifestyle and more personal, but the demand was immense. And when we started in 2019, the big challenge was training people, because we went in a town that there hadn't been a factory in over 20 years. So the first thing I did was I found a picture downtown Swainsboro, Georgia, and it was a picture from 1972 of 800 employees standing in front of a factory called Creston Mills. I hung it up in my foyer so that as we were hiring and training young and new people, they would kind of see there was a heritage here. And what happened was people started seeing their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, and relatives, old relatives that were in that picture. And it just felt right. So when we opened, we sort of got the whole South Georgia behind us. And Nelson Swartz from the New York Times did a big article on America Knits and about that picture in the foyer. And the article was, "Factories Making a Comeback in the U.S., Will It Work?" And it was basically saying America Knits is a test. Of course, I didn't know Mitch then. He's been rolling since he never left. So, but anyway, I think the real reason I came back is there was opportunity, and I'm from here, right? So I learned the business in North Carolina, sort of wanted to return to my roots.
All right, thanks. Well, that concludes what we're going to discuss here with the panel, but I would like to open it up if there's anybody in the audience have any questions. There's a mic.
Hi, thank you. My first part of my question is for Laura. I was curious about what you were talking about retaining some of the wax on the cotton. And I'm asking about that because if I understand, part of the benefit of the wax on cotton is to retain some of its water-resistant properties. And just regarding a lot of the conversation about water-repellent finishes and, the negative impacts of the chemicals used in those finishes, I was just wondering first why the wax is initially removed, and if you've discovered that leaving some of it in some way helps retain some of that water-resistant property in the fabric?
You need to come work for me. You nailed it. That's exactly what it is. To be perfectly honest with you, yes. Conventionally, people think just strip it of everything. Strip the cotton of everything. Now, what we didn't realize is that with that caustic soda, it's making it weaker. So we approached it in a kinder, gentler fashion, leaving that wax on, the paraffins and wax on. We found that it dyed better. It uses less dye stuff. Ask me the details on how that does. I'm going to send you to my R&D guy. Because there's a technical answer to this. Good one, but it does dye better. Now, it comes out naturally hydrophobic. We can lock that hydrophobicity in if we choose to, if people want this long term. We can strip it. Now, a lot of people don't want underwear that's hydrophobic, let's face it, right? We need hydrophilic underwear. Most would want hydrophilic underwear. So we can do either or. We have that flexibility, but during that process, we can gently take it off, or we can gently leave it on. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And could I just quickly extend to the rest of the group about dyes and finishes, because usually the Made in America designation has traditionally covered cut and sew, and a couple of you have touched on this, but of course, the full manufacturing process of textiles, of course, includes those areas that are messier and require a lot of chemical management, and perhaps some communities might not be excited if that part of the industry was to return. I know New Jersey in particular has had a difficult history with chemical dyes and the environment, and so I was just wondering, as far as dyes and finishes, like what processes are available to you within the country, and do you think that there needs to be some improvement in what is available?
That is,
You
you're asking some really deep questions. Alex, you want to do this, or you want me to do it? Go ahead.
I'll address that question, or at least I'll try to. The dye houses that are still in the United States today are very modern. They reclaim a lot of the product in-house. They're even, wastewater coming out of the dye machine is being recirculated to heat incoming water going back into the dye machine. So, but the other thing, the brands and retailers that all of us service today, they have very high standards on what's acceptable in terms of dyes and chemicals that we use. So at least all the dye houses we work with are monitored by third-party organizations looking to make sure that the products are safe, not only for environmental concerns, but for our employees. Obviously, we don't want our employees exposed to anything that's going to be harmful to their health. Can I say it's a perfect world? Absolutely not. But I think today, compared to what New Jersey may have experienced 35, 40, 50 years ago, it's a different playing field complete with the type of chemicals and dyes that we use. Somebody on the panel, it may have been Steve, mentioned that we can't use, maybe it was Mitch, can't use all the chemicals that are available offshore. And that's true. There's no rayon fiber made in the United States because it's a very caustic procedure to create rayon. It's illegal here. So if we knit rayon yarn, we are buying imported yarn because the government won't allow us to do it. So I think if you start thinking about EPA and the different government organizations that are monitoring the U.S. operations on a daily basis, it's fairly safe in terms of what we're seeing. Will tomorrow something new and better come along? Probably. 5 years from now, definitely. But I feel pretty good about where the U.S. industry is at today in terms of dyes and chemicals.
I have just one thing to add.
Steve?
Just one thing to add. We have the benefit of having a lot of research universities, and I've talked to several people here that have developed new processes at Georgia Tech, at NC State. Graham, in fact, was telling me about some of the work y'all do at NC State. And I think that the U.S. textile industry, when there is a problem, the research goes into solving it. And to the rayon question, they are making tencel now. We are doing tencel fiber in the U.S., which is basically the same as rayon. It's not as harsh a product. So I think if we continue to evolve as an industry and we're able to stay in business as an industry, we can and will be the best.
Do we have time for one more? One more question? You pick.
Ask questions, which is good.
Hi, so I am a cut and sew manufacturer, and I have been interested in the Fabric Act, and I was just interested to find out what you guys thought of that.
Anybody familiar with it?
I don't know that I'm familiar with it. The Fabric Act?
Let her explain.
Yeah, it's what I've read about it. It's a piece of legislation, a federal legislation that is being championed by Kirsten Sinema, and what I've seen is it mainly supports wages and worker fairness, treating workers fairly. But yeah, it's interesting that no one has a.
I mean, that would.
No, I thought it was federal. Yeah.
So is the question?
I'll let you make a comment then.
Fabric Act. The Fabric Act is New York State, and that's. But the federal act, it has a similar name. It's right. It's Congressman Gillibrand, and it passed, and that was worker fairness and maybe some agricultural aspects. The New York State Fabric Act is more about accountability and setting science-based targets for manufacturing, reporting that on companies' websites, making new targets for improvements to meet those standards.
We have another expert over here who has a comment for you guys. So, all right. And then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, I'd just love to add to that. It's actually called the Fashioning Accountability and Building Real Institutional Change Act, and it's currently in the process of becoming a bill, and it's really based on SB 62 that was passed in California as far as creating a floor and not a ceiling for garment worker wages. And yeah, it's really important that we consider that, especially when one of the things you said is the hardest is getting a workforce. And I think if they were paid a floor wage, then we could sort of move forward from there. So it's something we can all learn more about. Happy to talk to you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I will add real quick, each of the members here have a booth up near the front entrance. We're out of time, so we can't field more questions during the session, but we'll be glad to talk with you individually at our booths. We'll be around here for a few more minutes if should anybody have some questions or want to approach us. Thank you so much. Thanks, Texworld, for allowing us to be a part of it. We thank you for your time.